green. Are you an ultimate Eagles football fan? Well, you're in the right place. Ready? This is Birds 365, hosted by the new Mac and Mac, Jody McDonald and John McMullen.
Here we go!
Who collectively have covered and talked about more than 50 plus years of Eagles football. Kick off your day with Birds 365. You'll get debate.
We love to argue.
You'll get the real story from inside the locker room. And you'll hear from some of the great football minds from around the region. You're about to become an Eagles insider. Get in the game. Join Jody Mack and Johnny Mack and join the football community that flocks to Birds 365. Birds 365 starts right now.
Welcome to the NFL. Let's go! Let's go! Go!
Good playoff Monday morning. That's just a fact, Jack. The Eagles are going to the playoffs. Why or how, we're not 100% sure. We do know for a fact they'll be playing next Monday night against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This is Birds 365 with Mac and Mac, John McMullen, Jody McDonald. J-Mac, this is Birds 365 episode number 292.
292. We got to be up in the 600s, right?
No, this would be. We've got many. We've got many under our belt. We got many more to go. This was about as ugly a Eagles effort. I need to apologize. I have to admit that I am woefully wrong. I thought that last week against the Arizona Cardinals, the Eagles had hit rock bottom. I think yesterday was worse. It really wasn't competitive, at least, and just comes down to the way you look at football. Is losing a close game late more painful or worse than being totally dominated by a team that was in the midst of a lousy season, which is actually worse? I think yesterday was worse than the loss at home to the Cardinals the week before. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, yesterday's the worst they played all season. I mean, it was 24-0 at halftime. They gave up at halftime. That's how bad it was. And they should have, by the way. And you didn't have the Jonathan Gannon knows us excuse. I guess you could throw out the Giants as a division rival. But I didn't hear anybody say that. Yeah, they were just a mess, abject mess on both sides of the football. Yeah, I think whenever this season is over, we're gonna look at that move from Sean Desai and Matt Patricia, and that's going to be sort of the headline of this season. Such a panic move in hindsight, such a disaster. You know, for all the people that say it couldn't get worse, yeah, it can get worse. That's what you said. Oh, it can't get worse than Jonathan Gannon. It got a hell of a lot worse. It can't get worse than Sean Desai. It got a hell of a lot worse. It can always get worse if you panic. And that move, and Emmanuel Acho, I put it on my Twitter account, did a quick clip breakdown of just the miscommunication on defense. In week 18, Jody, granted, a lot of moving parts, but now he's got what's changed between Sean Desai and Matt Patricia. Now he's got Hassan Reddick doing things he's not comfortable doing. He's got Josh Sweat doing things he's not comfortable. So you have the miscommunication of the young players, which is kind of baked in. And then you're adding the veteran players because you're changing up things on the fly. Just an abject disaster. And I always have a tough time getting to the offense because the defense is so bad, but the offense was every bit as bad. Jalen Hurts, maybe that's the worst he's ever played. Now, obviously, it was a short span, but his passer rating was 20 in the 20s. To compound it, he dislocated his middle finger on his throwing hand. They have no blitz. They have no answers for the blitz. I mean, you're coming in there. There are two guys that are going to blitz, and that's Flores and Martindale. And Wink's one of them, and they play him twice a year. And you don't have any answers for something that's coming. No answers. Zero.
And Flores, as you say, does blitz, but he also doesn't blitz. He'll rush 2 and drop 9.
Yeah.
Wink is one direction, straight ahead. He's coming. He's bringing numbers. He's going to blitz any opportunity he can. He's the easier to do. Trying to figure out an offense, set up a game plan against Flores is not easy because he'll diverse on you. Not Wink. Wink comes straight ahead at you, and they didn't have answers for it.
And they don't have answers, and they haven't had answers. And by the way, that goes back far past Brian Johnson for all the people. They didn't have answers last year for the blitz. They just overcame it. They don't have traditional blitz beaters, what we call in offenses, hot routes, things like that. They don't do it.
They do. It's called the bubble screen, which doesn't work with this current iteration of the Eagles team.
They just I don't, they've out talented people for a long stretch of time. And now that teams have kind of figured out what they're trying to do, and there's some injuries and guys missing and all that kind of stuff. And that's the only hope for the playoffs is getting guys back. It's gotten ugly. And, Nick Sirianni, I asked him the question. He got, they kept saying belief. I said, well, why do you have belief? You lost 5. And he's talking about flushing the game, flushing the month. Well, you only got one flush left because the next flush is the season. Slay's going to be back. AJ's going to play. DeMonte's going to be back. Swift's going to be back. Fletcher's going to be back. So they weren't playing a lot of guys. Don't get me wrong, but shouldn't be that bad. And it was. It was
right.
It is that bad.
Before the game started, we debated here during the week, basically all week long, about how the Eagles would handle their players and who would play and who wouldn't play. And we thought that maybe because of discretion, they would sit some guys. Discretion to trying to keep players healthy and not get them hurt. And man, when AJ went down, I could just hear my phone's ringing on WIP. Why the hell was he on the field? Of course, you're going to get that. They didn't pull players because of discretion. They pulled players because of the disgrace that was the first half against the New York Giants. You said last week you'd be doing scoreboard watching, and that would help you determine, if not dictate, to determine how you would pull guys off the field. Oh, the only scoreboard they needed to watch was at MetLife Stadium, 24-0, trailing the New York Giants. By the time Sirianni started pulling guys, the Cowboys had just gone ahead of the Commanders. They actually hung in the game for the first quarter and a half before the Cowboys blew them out. The scoreboard of out-of-town games meant nothing. The only thing that mattered was what was happening in the game between the Giants and the Eagles, and they were just simply undressed. And that's scary as heck, Johnny Mac. Nick Sirianni can lean on belief all he wants. It's really tough for anybody to have any belief in this team at this time.
No, it is. And, they're trying to talk themselves into it. You get that kind of feeling. Now, I still think, I still think they're a better team than Tampa Bay. I still think that's a good matchup because, but it has more to do with Tampa Bay than it does with Philadelphia. But then if you look long term, I don't see any way they could beat San Francisco. So, hopefully you're able to go down to Tampa, get some confidence, and you never know what happens in this league. But right now it doesn't look good. It does not look good, to say the least.
And we really want to, and we will, look at the matchup between the Eagles and the Bucs. They played earlier this year when the Eagles were looking like a team that had just gotten to the Super Bowl 10 months previous, and they handled Tampa quite easily in their house back in week number 3. The Bucs are what they are, and they got off to a slow start. Then they won a bunch of games in a row. Then they stumbled in the middle of the season. They've been kind of a tough team to get a handle on all year. but they're a slightly better than average team, and slightly better than average teams can make the playoffs when you're in a very weak division like they were this year. But I just can't come up with any reasons why I think the Eagles can get out of the morass that they're in. We've been waiting for it all right, fine. San Francisco, they shut us up. We can't beat Dallas and Dallas. Losing to Seattle on the road, losing last week at home to Arizona, and you can have a bad game. Johnny Mack, anybody can have a bad day. The ball doesn't bounce your way. You got a key injury. You come out a little bit flat. That can happen to anybody. 3 games in the last 4 games, losing to inferior teams, talent-wise, just gives you no momentum. That was my cry all week leading into this game. They needed to build their mojo back. They needed to get momentum back. That's why I thought they should play their starters, because it was more about the Eagles than what the Cowboys are doing or what the playoff standings were. They needed to establish for themselves, for their own confidence level, that they could return to somewhere near what they were last year. They fell flat on their face. And I don't know what the magic elixir that they're going to drink this week that's going to turn things around. They'll say all the right things. Words sticks and so you can throw whatever catchphrase you want out there. Can you buy anything that they attempt to verbally sell you this week as an Eagle reporter?
No, not from the belief standpoint. There's guys, Brandon Graham was talking about the doubt. Josh Sweat's like, basically he doesn't know what's going on. It's, from the player standpoint, you could sense some of the doubt. And Nick, put on a brave face and claimed he believes in everyone, blah, blah, blah. There's no belief in that right now. And that's the word he used, ironically. Other than what I said, that's the only thing that you can hang your hat on. You meant, what are the problems with, they lost Sidney Brown. It looks like it's going to be a torn ACL. And that was a MetLife injury. He looked like he caught his ankle covering a punt. Cam Jurgens hurt his eye. Obviously, Jalen Hurts, I mentioned, got poked in his eye. Cam, dislocated finger for Jalen Hurts. Reed Blankenship hurt his groin. There were a couple of injuries on top of the disaster. Landon Dickerson, for instance, had to play center because Cam was out because of the eye when they took Kelsey out. And then at one point, Landon went in the injury tent, banged something up, and Kelsey was getting ready to go back in because he would have had to, because they didn't have anybody else to play center. And ultimately, Landon was able to get out of the tent and get back on the field. So it didn't happen. So to add insult to injury, they got a bunch of guys banged up. Now, the guys, AJ, I think is fine. He was greeting everybody as they came back to the locker room. It looks like he's going to be fine. Obviously, the guys they were cautionary with, DeMonte, Slay, because he probably could have came back in a different situation this week. I expect them back next week. And, when your biggest playmaker is Quez Watkins, that's a big difference between Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown and everything being back to normal. And that's what Tampa Bay is going to get. So if you want to hang your hat on something, I would hang my hat on that.
On the fact that they did have some guys hurt going into the game, some guys hurt during the game, other than Sidney Brown being done for the year. And it wasn't official, right? They didn't officially announce it, but everybody.
No, but I saw him. Yeah, I mean, he had a huge brace. He's definitely not coming back this week. Right. I mean, your best case scenarios, it's not as bad as Beard, but they usually don't screw up those early ACL indications. Pretty easy test to see what's going on there.
They right now are in a really bad place, a really bad spot. And Nick Sirianni will say all the right things, and Brandon Graham will say all the right things during the week because he is Mr. Positivity, and he will try and come up with. I'm struggling here, guys. I don't know what John just did a good job to try and sell me, you, and everybody else. Hey, look at all the injuries, and most of these guys will be able to play. Yeah, so I'm just.
That's fair. That's fair.
I am not in a place where I think the Philadelphia Eagles can turn on the spigot or flip the light switch, use whatever phrase you need to describe just immediately changing something. Change happens over time. And unfortunately, change has been bad for the Philadelphia Eagles this year. But one that you mentioned earlier, and I get your take on this, Jeff Kerr is going to join us coming up just a couple of minutes. Will it come out? I know it's not going to come out at this time, and we have to see what happens with the Eagles coaching staff when the season is over and done with, and it could change from top to bottom. And when I say top, I include the head coach, Nick Sirianni. Will we ever get the true background story as to why Matt Patricia is calling plays for this Philadelphia Eagle team?
I think we will, and I think we will, to be honest, when I think both of them will be gone, but certainly when Sean's going to be gone, and I think ultimately we'll get the real story. Yeah, and I don't think it's going to be a good one because I think it was panic driven, and when you're and people can look at it now and see how the Eagles are leaking oil, but I mean they started thinking about making a change when they were 8-1. That makes no sense, none. Zero. And for all the people who said it couldn't get worse, you're living it. It's gotten exponentially worse. Now you got where you had communication issues with young players. Now you're having communication issue with veteran players because they're changing things on the fly by the seat of their pants. It's gotten much worse. Young coaches need time to grow in their positions, and that's what Sean was, and they didn't give him that opportunity. Now, maybe they had no belief in him to begin with. In fact, that's the clear indication to me. They had no belief in him from the moment he stepped in the building. That's my feeling.
How do you hire a guy like that? How do you give him the job if you've got no belief?
Well, they'll tell you because they were screwed over by the tampering and it was so late and nobody else was available, which is absolute bullshit because you can call every coaching staff around the NFL, every position coach, you can if you offer them a coordinator spot, even if they're under contract, they can leave. You cannot block those. You used to be able to block them, but you can't do it anymore. So that's bullshit. And that was their decision, and they regretted it, and they reversed course, and it's gotten even worse.
All right. What I meant by will we get the real story, was it all Sirianni's call? Was he the guy who at 8-1 said, yeah, we, meaning him, because he was the driving force in the selection of the defensive coordinator, made a mistake. This guy's just not up to the job. Was that him? And did he have to sell it to Howie Roseman and Jeff Lurie, or Jeff Lurie and Howie Roseman whispering in his ear going, yeah, we kind of gave you the call on the defensive coordinator. This Desai guy is terrible. He's just not getting the job done. That's the question I wanted, just for my own edification, to find out how the decision-making process went down.
I've said pretty consistently, and I know I'll just say real quick. So I've said I do believe Nick, and it was his decision for two reasons. One, how he found him originally. And while, yes, Nick approved the hiring and hired him, how we found him. Number two, he's still in the organization. I think if it came from up top, he would have been fired. He would have been gone. And Nick wanted to keep him around because, I don't know, out of some disjointed loyalty or whatever. So for those two reasons, I do believe Nick, and it was his decision. Now, he's got to run it by people. It's not like he can just walk into the office and say, I'm making this change. He's got to run it by Howie and Jeffrey, and they certainly approved of it. But those are the two reasons why I believe Nick was at the center of it.
Because I think I think that will factor into, and Jeff Kerr's going to join us in just a second here, I promise. 5 weeks ago, what was the percentage chance that Nick Sirianni could be fired after this season? Zero. That's where I was at. After last week's collapse against the Cardinals, I said, John, I got to admit to you, I'm like up to between 5 and 10%. Didn't think I was going to get here, but I am. Still think Sirianni's going to be the head coach next year, but after yesterday's loss, I'm north of 25%, heading to 50%. And if they lose to Tampa next week, if they go down there and play the same lousy game that they played the last 2 weeks against the Cardinals, and there is no change, I could get north of 50%, which means he could absolutely be fired. So.
By the way, Black Monday has started. It started last night. Arthur Smith out in Atlanta. Ron Rivera officially out in Washington. Scott Fitter, the Panthers GM, has been fired. The Giants, think about this.
Panthers GM got fired?
Yeah. The Giants fired Bobby Johnson, their offensive line coach, understandably so, and Thomas McGahee, their special teams coordinator, after their greatest performance in years. Poor guys. But, obviously it's long.
That's what Black Monday is all about. All right. McDonald and McMullen, Mac Birds 365. Our buddy, Mr. Monday Mornings, Jeff Kerr from CBS Sports, was in the press box with John yesterday watching the annihilation of the Philadelphia Eagles. We'll see what he has to say next here on Birds 365.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
At Pond Lehocky, we've recovered billions of dollars for our clients, and we're confident we can do the same for you. With over 250 years of combined courtroom experience, we've helped over 100,000 injured clients obtain some of the largest settlements in Pennsylvania. One conversation is all it takes to help you and your family get back on track. If you've been injured in an accident, give Pond Lehocky a call.
They're carving them up and good play calling along the way. First and goal at the 6.
On the field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Underdog Fantasy has a way for you to play alongside your favorite football team all season long with their fantasy pick'em game. You pick between 2 to 5 players, select whether they'll go higher or lower on one of their stats, then do what you usually do on a Sunday, watch the games. You can win up to 20 times your money in a single game by going 5 for 5. It's a fantasy game, and the Sports Betting Show wants you to get involved. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com. When you sign up, use the promo code WIN, and Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. That's UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
And the big story on Action News?
Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
EAGLES, Eagles.
This is Birds 365. Not a very happy morning after what the Eagles have done these last couple of weeks. Jeff Kerr laughs. You got a good attitude, Jeff Kerr. I'm pretty down in the dumps and finding it difficult to laugh, but you should laugh in the face of adversity. Good for you, Jeff Kerr.
Flush it. Flush it, Jeff. Flush it.
Yeah, we flushed it. They're 0-0, John. Didn't you know that?
0-0. You only got one flush left. The next one, everything goes down.
Very difficult to believe when the Eagles were trying to put forth that narrative yesterday. You believe anybody? Was there any one individual who said any one individual thing that you go, all right, maybe, just maybe they can hang their hat on that? Or did you just listen to it and hear the teacher from Charlie Brown going, wah, 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 wah?
Well, I was with Brandon Graham for 6 minutes yesterday. I believe him because Brandon Graham has earned the benefit of the doubt. And I really do think the defense is trying to get things right. They just don't have the personnel. They don't have the talent. And Matt Patricia's going to be out of there after next week or 2 weeks or whatever it's going to be. Sean Desai is going to be out of there. I just think they're trying to do the most they can. I just think this offense, though, they look lost. They can't pick up a blitz. I don't think their offensive linemen have an answer. And look, I know they didn't have A.J. Brown for a lot of this game yesterday, and Devonta Smith wasn't there, but this has been a recurring thing for 5 weeks. And I just said this on a radio spot just 20 minutes ago. It feels like they heard all the talk when they were 10-1 about how they weren't any good. And it just snowballed when they actually were losing games. And now they just can't get out of it.
Yeah, it's funny because I can't look past the defense to get to the offense. There's plenty of issues with the offense. By no means am I trying to give them an excuse. Jalen Hurts looked terrible yesterday. There's no plan for the blitz, and it's Wink Martindale. It's not like somebody surprised you coming out that, oh, we're going to get pressure today. So that is disturbing to me. But, boy, I can't get past the defense. From play number one, Jeff Kerr, play number one of the game, they're playing cover two. So they have Hassan Reddick dropping into coverage like a cover two linebacker. So, that's not the greatest plan in the world. And not shockingly, as Tyrod Taylor starts to escape the pocket, instead of staying with his responsibility, Hassan, natural instinct, go get the quarterback, and wide open receiver right behind him for a big gain. That's the kind of stuff that happens when you change your defensive coordinator after 13 games. I mean, this is the dumbest decision in the history of the world. There might be a little bit hyperbole there, but this is the dumbest decision in the history of the world. Okay, if you think the guy stinks, you do it earlier. And I'm talking about Sean Desai. You don't do it after 13 games. And you certainly don't do it after you played Buffalo, which everybody struggles with, and San Francisco and Dallas at home, which was scoring 40 points a game at the time. And all of a sudden, they lose 3 games to teams they shouldn't lose to, as Jody pointed out. If they win those 3 games, Jeff, Seattle, Arizona, the New York Giants, you're supposed to win those 3 games. Seattle's pretty good, but they had a backup quarterback. They're not a terrible team, but you get the point. The other 2 are terrible. I think everybody's fine. Doesn't mean anything, but the record looks good. I think everybody's fired up for the playoffs. You have the number 2 seed. Everything's fine. That move is a freaking disaster. It really is.
I want to add on to this. The domino effect would have happened. The 49ers would have had to play yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
They would have had to play because the Eagles would have had to, I think, the same record if we're going by this. And yet, what did the 49ers end up? 13-4? So
yeah, well, that would have shifted their mentality. I do believe they would have played. They would have still had the number 1 seed. But
yeah.
2 is pretty good.
But look, because the Eagles had to play yesterday, A.J. Brown don't get hurt. Jalen Hurts don't dislocate his finger. So everything just kind of adds up.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you about Jeff. Let me ask you about the quarterback. And yes, he's got a hurt finger, and I give him credit for at least gutting it out and trying to go back in and play. And then they unquestionably were going to get him out of there ASAP. He was lousy before he hurt his finger, and he hasn't been very good for like not weeks, months. This is the guy they made a $250 million commitment to. And I know how great he was last year, and I've been on the Jalen Hurts bandwagon since draft night. I got concerns about the quarterback going forward. Everybody's going to worry about Nick Sirianni should be fired, the entire coaching staff. They've linked themselves to a quarterback who had as big a regression from year to year as I've seen in a while, Jeff. When was the last time you had an MVP runner-up go from that high heights to below the middle of the pack? That's what Jalen Hurts is this year. He's below the middle of the pack in quarterback play in the National Football League. How much attention should we be paying to the quarterback and what kind of an effect he's going to have on the future of this organization?
I don't think Brian Johnson should be responsible for Jalen Hurts anymore, if you want my honest opinion. I've had enough.
Brian Johnson is dragging Jalen Hurts down.
I don't like. I always say this in my life. In my life, I don't need my buddy when I'm struggling telling me, "Oh, you're doing a good job. You're doing this. You're doing that." I don't know if Brian Johnson's telling them that, but it seems like Jalen Hurts needs his buddy, his companion around to kind of help him get through some things. And look, I could be spitballing here, but it's just not good for him. I think he needs tough coaching right now. And I don't know who that can be. Shane Steichen probably was that guy. I mean, and you still have Brian Johnson around, but now Brian Johnson is the guy calling plays, the guy responsible for this guy throwing. By the way, do you guys know Jalen Hurts has the same exact numbers Dak Prescott had last year in terms of touchdowns and interceptions? And we ripped Dak Prescott to no end.
I pointed out Dak would regress back to the mean pretty consistently. I said Dak had a history of not turning the football over, and he's probably going to go back to not turning the football over. And he did. And I feel the same way about Jalen Hurts because he's been very ball security conscious for most of his career. Not as long as the stretch as Dak, but still pretty consistent, not turning the football over. I do think he'll bounce back next season. But I think the Carson Wentz, Jalen Hurts ain't the same guy as Carson Wentz.
No, he's not.
He does not. It does not bother him. I think that the relationship between Brian Johnson, Jalen Hurts, everybody brings up Press Taylor and best friends. They're not best friends. Guess what? Brian Johnson knew him when he was met him when he was 4 years old. Well, guess what? When you're playing for, you're not hanging out with a 4-year-old kid. When he recruited him twice, he didn't get him. It's not like they've been thick as thieves. I think it's so overblown. I think Jalen Hurts is not Carson Wentz. He's not looking for people that say, "Oh, you're great." In fact, I think he's looking for the opposite, which people have said pretty consistently. Nick Sirianni said. Nick Sirianni yells at him pretty consistently over the years. How many other quarterbacks get yelled at? Because he's got that coach's son's mentality. I think because Philadelphia went through it with Carson Wentz, they think it's happening again. It ain't happening. He is not Carson Wentz. He's not. He's tougher mentally. He doesn't care if people yell at him. They're not best friends. They're struggling, but I don't think that's the reason.
I just don't think Brian Johnson should be here anymore. And there's too much connections to the guy. I mean, personally, that's just how I feel about it. Look, I'm just looking at it from a number standpoint. You went from, like Joe said, you went from a guy who was runner-up in MVP last year to a guy who is below average right now. And is it all his fault? No. I mean, the play calling has a lot to do with it. The lack of adjustments, the pass protection, receivers hurt. There's a lot involved here, but this is one of the top 5 paid quarterbacks in the league. He's not on a rookie deal anymore. And I agree with you, John. I think he is going to regress back. I shouldn't even say regress back. Progress to to where he was last year, because he doesn't turn the football over much. This is an anomaly for anybody, but it's just frustrating to see a guy this good play this bad.
It's a little scary from my viewpoint that I know Nick Sirianni keeps saying he likes to be coached hard, but that's just Nick Sirianni. He's his coach. I'd really like to hear from somebody else other than his coach that, hey, I know this guy, one of his teammates, to come out and say, yeah, the coach is rough on Nick and he eats it up. And that really motivates. The only guy I've heard it from is Sirianni. So I'm not just going to blindly accept that Jalen Hurts is the kind of guy who can be coached hard. I don't know that
you've heard it. You've heard it from Shane in the past. You've heard it from Brian. You've heard it from Alex Tanney. You've heard it from AJ Brown, who has difficult conversations with him as the diva receiver. I think you've heard it from more than Nick Sirianni, and I think you've seen it again. When I see a quarterback getting yelled at by a head coach, that don't happen a lot in the NFL.
Mike McCarthy does not yell at Dak Prescott. I'll tell you that right.
Nobody yells at their quarterback, especially a proven guy, I should say. Sometimes there's some young guys. There have been so many quarterbacks playing this year because of all the injuries. I think you've heard it from far more people than Nick Sirianni. I think you've heard it from Jalen himself. Now, that might not be that meaningful. But yeah, I don't have any questions about his ability or his. I should say I don't have any questions about him stopping the mindset of he wants to be coached easily. He doesn't want to be challenged. I don't see that with Jalen Hurts. I see plenty of issues with Jalen Hurts, but that's not one of them. And I think that's one of the advantages when you start talking about, because people make the natural comp, and it's because they're in Philadelphia. I get why they do it. He's not Carson Wentz. He just isn't.
No, he's not. But I want to point this to you, John, or maybe this is just me spitballing here. Do you feel like the front office is trying to avoid the mistakes they made with Carson with Jalen now?
The best example, somebody gave me the entitlement equation, and they brought up Joel Embiid with the Sixers. In that, are they pampering him that way a little bit too much now that he's the $250 million guy? Even that, I don't believe. I could buy that a little bit more. I don't necessarily believe it. But I mean, clearly there's something wrong. I'm not trying to say that. Clearly he's regressed from last season. Maybe it's just a natural regression because last season he had such a phenomenal season. Talked about it all the time. I talked about what all the defensive players. How many players had career years on the Philadelphia Eagles last season?
A lot.
A lot. That generally doesn't. You don't usually. Some people do, but most people don't usually follow up a career year with another career year. It usually regresses back to the mean. That's what you have to be concerned about. Is this the real Jalen Hurts as a player? And was last season the outlier? That's what I would be concerned.
We had this question with Josh Allen in 2021, and he came back to not 2020 level, but he was pretty damn good in 2022. In 2023, he was really damn good. I mean, as you saw last night against the Dolphins. So I think that's what you got to hope for. Like Jalen Hurts, maybe he'll never get to the 2020 level again, but or the 2022 level, but I don't think he's going to be anywhere near.
And by the way, guys, I'm still of the belief, even this season, I know you said he might be below the average statistically, but I still think he's a top 10 quarterback in this league this season. He's probably 10, or he's probably right there though, which ain't good enough.
As judged by how?
Film and that kind of stuff. Let's see. I'll look where PFF had him coming in. And the grades aren't updated from yesterday, which he was a disaster, so that'll hurt him. But he didn't play that much. And they had him. They had him sixth coming into the game.
Sixth? Yeah, sixth. I'm disagreeing with that.
Only Josh Allen, Dak Prescott, Lamar Jackson, Tua, Brock Purdy, Jalen Hurts. Sixth.
Well, I'd have all those 5 ahead of him right now. There were a lot of guys hurt this year too, like Justin Herbert, Kirk Cousins.
Cousins is 7 because he played enough. Stafford was 8, Herbert 9, Mahomes 10, Jared Goff 11, CJ Stroud 12.
On what planet was Jalen Hurts a better quarterback than Patrick Mahomes this year?
I think CJ Stroud was a better quarterback than Jalen Hurts this year.
Agreed. No question. No questions asked about that one.
Yeah, well, part of it is, again, we're not talking about 6 games. We're talking about 17 games. At one point,
which quarterback are you referring to with 6 games?
Jalen. He lost 5 of 6, but I'm saying,
okay.
And everybody has that. Everybody has that in the forefront of their mind. They were 10-1,
and he was a top. I think if. After 10-1, I think we all could have sat here and said Jalen Hurts was easily top 5.
At one point, he was the leader on the MVP betting. I think people forget that. At one point, he was the leader, and obviously things.
You know where I elevate Hurts? I actually think he's one of the guys that can carry a football team. And I think you saw that through the first 11 games of the year. They probably were not a 10-1 team, and he elevated them to be in the 10-1 team. They probably were never that good, and he regressed a bit, and the team did. So
if you take the last 6 games, he's been well below average. But again, it's an entire season.
It's a 17 game. Yeah, I got him in the middle of the pack as per 17, not just these last 6. These 6 have dragged him down enough to get him into the middle of the pack. That's just my rating.
I'm with John. I think I'd have him like 10, maybe 11, maybe 9.
They have him higher than I would have him, but I'd have him right in that 10. 11, somewhere in that range.
When you drop from 2 to 10 or 11, that's pretty damn significant.
No, I agree.
Maybe he's not 17th.
And that's 11th. What I said. The bigger problem is maybe that's where he's going to settle. 10, 11.
Which isn't good enough. I agree, John.
Yeah.
When you're being paid top of the market money, that's an issue that Howie Roseman's going to have to deal with. And no one this year has convinced me otherwise. I'm going to make a statement here, and I can honestly look everybody in the streaming eye and say, I don't know this, but I believe this. We've talked so much about belief today. Where do you come up with your belief? I believe there were conversations had between Jalen Hurts, his agent, Howie Roseman, Nick Sirianni, and Brian Johnson during this offseason, alerting Jalen to the fact that he's now a $250 million quarterback. And he might not be able to run with reckless abandon like he did last year, which is a big part of what made him the number 2 quarterback in the entire National Football League. That discretion is the better part of valor, that we can't afford to lose you for a long period of time during the year. I don't know if the conversation was started by the Eagles front office, by the Eagle coaching staff, by Jalen's agent saying, listen, we're now going to be a different guy. You're signing a slightly different quarterback. You're not going to be running. Or Jalen himself, who said, I got to be out there for my guy. I can't put myself at risk. I believe that conversation was had. How often, on how many levels, who was the person who started the conversation? I don't know any of that. But I do believe has happened because Jalen Hurts is just not the same guy. He's not. And I think that it's kind of a domino effect with his ability to run and make plays with his legs. He's just not doing it. I think it came in as an agreement with everybody involved. I don't think it was fear. I don't think it was him being greedy and I got to protect I think it was a group decision that we're going to use Jalen differently going forward. And I think that decision has failed miserably.
Well, I've heard that, and I believe it to a certain degree. I know from Jalen, from a personal perspective, it was very important for him to play all 17 games, which he managed to accomplish. And the thought process was, and then in the playoffs, all right, we're going to play. You're going to play like he normally plays last year. So if that happens, maybe that's something to hang your hat on. Maybe if he's trying to get through the season's over, now it's win or go home, and now it's all right. Maybe it's back to what it was.
And think about this, John. The last 2 years, had the ankle injury in the playoffs, and he had the shoulder injury going into the playoffs. And it did affect him a little bit early in the playoffs, but the Eagles were good enough they were going to get by it. This year, it looked like he was going to be healthy-ish going into the playoffs, a lot healthier than he was the last 2 years, and then the finger injury happened in Week 18. So, yeah, I agree with that. I think the key was let's have our $55 million quarterback, or 50, well, I forgot how much he makes now, our $50 million quarterback healthy going into the postseason, and we'll take our chances. And, running Jalen, aggressive Jalen, no prisoners Jalen, I think this team is as dangerous as any. But now we got to worry about whether, and I think he's going to play, but I think we got to worry about how's the finger? How's that going to be? AJ Brown, how's the knee going to be? It's, again, all kind
Devontae, how's the ankle going to be?
Yeah, domino effect. It's kind of crazy. Like last year, they had the luxury of losing to the Cowboys and losing to the Saints, and you're just like, okay, whatever. They're going to be the number 1 seed. They're going to win the division.
Yeah. By the way, 19 consecutive years, NFC East. No back-to-back champions.
Isn't that crazy?
It is crazy.
By the way, Ron Rivera was fired.
We got an Eagle goal for next year. I know we're looking many, many, many moves down the road. Win that division, Eagles. Keep the Cowboys from being the team that wins.
Eagles probably will. Eagles probably will win the division next year based on the history.
Yeah. So that's crazy. But me, I got to go back to the defense. I mean, what are they trying to accomplish? I want somebody to explain it.
How about Nolan Smith in coverage against Saquon Barkley yesterday? Wasn't that a sight to behold?
I mean, sometimes you get caught. I'm okay with. I'm not one of those people that say you can never drop Hassan Reddick in coverage. I think that's silly. I always use the baseball analogy. Nolan Ryan didn't just throw fastballs. You got to throw a curveball. I have no problem with that. When you're doing it too much, it starts, to be a problem. You mentioned Nolan Smith on Saquon Barkley. I mentioned Hassan in cover 2. Why? What is going on? What is going on?
John, I kid you not. So during the game yesterday, right after that, Nolan Smith, Barkley had that 46-yard catch. There were a couple former NFL players and a couple current college players text me and go, "What are they doing over there?" And I'm like, I'm assuming you mean Smith-Fall Barkley. And they're like, yes. Like, how can you put this kid in a position to succeed covering Saquon Barkley? And I'm like, I don't have an answer for it. I don't. And it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy what Matt Patricia's doing. Like, I always believed to get the most success out of the talent you have around you, you put them in the best position to succeed. Hassan Reddick rushes the passer. Nolan Smith rushes the passer. James.
Josh Sweat. They had Josh Sweat. Emmanuel Acho at Emmanuel Acho, former Eagles linebacker. Does a good job breaking down film. He puts something up pretty quickly.
He's more than a hot take artist, by the way.
He's very good with film. And he breaks down 3 specific plays where I'm like, the words he used were atrocious, awful, and gross.
Gross, definitely.
I don't, and this is from a player's perspective who played linebacker. I mean, cover 2, your responsibility. So I brought up Reddick, kind of in his mind, he's obviously a pass rusher. So he loses discipline and you have a big play. Josh Sweat, same thing. He loses discipline, simple route, a combination by the Giants. He was supposed to keep the inside guy, goes to the outside guy because he's not used to being coverage. It's all communication issues, and they made it worse by what they did.
And that's what the players were talking about when Sean Desai was there. We got to fix the communication. Multiple guys said that in that second. By the way, John, is Tristan McCollum the guy next week?
No, I think, and we'll have to see. Obviously, they have an extra day. It's Monday night, which we haven't mentioned. So another Monday night game, Eagles Buccaneers in Tampa Bay. So they have an extra day. I do think Reed will be back. I think that was more precautionary than anything else. So I think it'll be Reed Blankenship and Kevin Byard, but remember, they started defensively with the 3 safety look, and Sidney Brown was getting better and better and better, and now he's gone. So that's off the table because you don't have any depth, and unless you want to go to Tristan McCullum or Mekhi Gardner or somebody of that nature, which they don't want to do. So that part of it's off, and now you're going to have to rely on more 2 linebacker sets, and you don't have good linebackers. And you don't have depth at linebacker. Your corners hopefully are better because Slay's back, and you don't have to play Ringo and Ricks as much. But Bradbury's having a bad season. The only thing helping you out next week is it's Tampa Bay, and they're throwing for 113 yards against Carolina, the worst.
And they have the worst running offense in the NFL, which means that they'll run for 150 against this team.
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, John, I didn't see better play when they were in the 3 safety look. You're right. Their linebackers stink. They stink on ice.
You saw better play from Sidney Brown, though.
Sidney Brown was...
I think he was getting better, but I'm not going to overstate it. He wasn't great. He was making mistakes, but I think he was adding something to
But he was a player you could hang your hat on and say, look, this guy is improving. Keely Ringo was the same way. Eli Ricks was the same way.
Exactly. For me, it was Brown and Ringo, and they brought a little physicality and athleticism. And Ricks is very good in coverage, but I had some problems in run support. It's really bad in run support. But at least it gave a little bit of juice and at least a little bit of optimism, because I think they really, really lack athleticism on the back end. And to put Brown and Ringo in there, you can kind of see it because those guys are so athletic. But they were making a lot of mistakes. I'm not going to say
the improvement for me is slight. Do you do it? Yeah, because you got to try and put the best team out there. And I'd rather have the more athletic guys and certainly the younger guys, because guess what, folks? Eagles probably going to get beat. I'm not declaring a loss next week yet because Tampa is a marginal playoff team at best. But the week after, if they find a way how to win it, there's no way I'm going to pick them to beat the Lions or anybody else.
If Tampa didn't lose to the Saints, which, by the way, Dennis Allen should not be a head coach today, but he probably will be. And if they didn't play like absolute garbage.
The Saints destroyed the poor Arthur Smith. Got him.
By the way,
running up the score, too.
I love how Dennis Allen's players defied him and decided to give Jamal Williams that touchdown in victory for the nation. That's the Dennis Allen I know.
Classless.
But anyway, besides that, but if Tampa Bay didn't play so bad against Carolina and they didn't lose to the Saints, I'd say they kill the Eagles. But this is probably the ideal opponent for the Eagles at this point.
So I'm not just discounting, but at some point the Eagles are going to lose this year. I believe that. And it could be exactly 1 week from today. And then we got to turn the page. You got to look forward for the future. And yeah, I want to see Brown and Ringo out there rather than either Shaq Leonard and or any other linebackers they thought they had. All of the linebackers. Well, let me turn into a question. Either Jeff, you or John. Of the linebackers on the Philadelphia Eagles roster right now, how many will be with the team next year?
Ben Van Summerlin will.
Yeah, Ben. That's about it. I would say, Ben Van Summerlin.
One. Now, at least Brown and Ricks and Ringo are going to be here in 2024. So,
Nakobe's going to be
that's
here.
What your job is as the coach is to prepare guys, not only win in the moment, but have a half an eye on the future. I just didn't see that much difference. They've been just tremendously awful on defense, no matter who they put out there over the last month. So if you want to hang your hat on, hey, at least they're young. Okay, I'm with you on that. At least they were better. Not really. They stink. They I guess there's levels of stink, but the defense is stunk with.
Well,
them out there on the
I
field.
saw some signs of potential improvement where I don't see that. That's probably a better way to phrase it. I think there was some potential improvement there.
Potential being a key word. Yes.
It's kind of like what we saw in Milton Williams a couple years ago. Like you saw the potential for him to be an impact player on this team.
Yeah,
that's how I feel.
By the way, how about Keegan Michael Key, the comedian, does that NFL script writing thing? If you guys have seen it, where they get script. How about all the things that happened? Matthew Stafford's going back to Detroit, and the Packers are playing the Cowboys, and Mike McCarthy, and Houston and Cleveland with Deshaun Watson and all that stuff. He's not playing, but
there's a lot of connections.
A lot of connections. Games. The NFL script writers got it right.
By the way, Chiefs and Dolphins are playing again too.
Tyreek Hill going back. Yeah, that was one of them as well.
Also, what I honestly feel is going to happen with the Eagles coming up. So I'm really weird with watching old NFL games, old NFL teams, because I'm fascinated with some of these teams. And the 99 Dolphins always fascinated me because that team was not good. And Dan Marino was god-awful his last year. Dan Marino won one road playoff game in his career. He was 38, could barely throw a football, and beat the Seahawks in the Kingdom. And then
Kingdom! We were talking about that.
Yeah, we were talking about this yesterday. And then what did they do the next week? They lose 62-7 to Jacksonville, the largest.
Oh, I remember that game.
Yeah, you remember they were down 38-0 before Dan Marino completed a pass in his final game.
That's what I get. That's what I get a feeling about the. Not to that degree, but I get a feeling like the Eagles are going to out-talent Tampa, and then they're just going to get their heads handed to them.
And pick your poison. Is it the 49ers or the Cowboys?
Yeah. That's kind of my feeling of how it ends for this team. But and I'll leave it there. At Jeff Kerr CBS. Make sure you follow Jeff on X, Twitter. Read him at CBS Sports. Nick Sirianni fired. It would have been laughable to consider this weeks ago. Now the groundswell is building. I'm still in the camp where he's not getting fired. But boy, people are really pushing that.
You know what, though, John? If they lose next week, you got to at least have the conversation about
it. Do you?
I don't think he's getting fired here. But I do.
Like Jody brings up a good point where he tells me he asks his callers, "Well, yeah, you can fire anybody. Who's coming back? Who are you replacing with?" And I just said it with the coordinators. You thought it couldn't get worse with Gannon, which was absurd, and it got much worse. You thought it couldn't get worse than Sean Desai, and it's gotten worse. I mean, does anybody learn from mistakes? Now, owners tend to be more emotional, Jeffrey Lurie. From a logical standpoint, I'll say this. There's no way Nick Sirianni's getting fired, and I'm going to have to argue this with Les Bowen, who's going to come on at 9:20. There's no way you should fire this guy. Does that mean they can't fire him? No. Of course, Jeffrey Lurie's already won a damn Super Bowl and fired a guy in 3 years.
Do you think, though, they go this approach? Okay, Nick, you keep your job. We're picking the coordinators this time.
No, I agree with that.
That's what I think's going to
happen. That's what John said all last week, and I couldn't agree with him more. There's the point to where Sirianni should be fired. And then there's the behind closed doors conversation about the redoing of the staff. That's what happened to Doug Peterson. That's how he got his walking papers. Yep. They wanted to completely gut his staff. He wanted to elevate guys. They couldn't get on the same page. Jeff said, listen, if you're going to put your foot down about this, Doug, we can make a real big decision here. And they did, and they fired him. That could get Nick Sirianni fired. I think John's got the exact right read on that. The biggest determining factor could be how they're going to handle the coaching staff going forward.
John, I want to present something to you here. I don't think he's going to get fired, but I've had him on my list of guys getting fired. Matt Eberflus, if he got fired, would you take him as the defense coordinator for this football team?
Oh, yeah. Defensive coordinator. Yeah. And by the way, you're going to see offensive coordinators as well, and people are going to want these. And
Ron Rivera just got fired, by the way.
Yeah. I don't want Ron. I think
I don't want him either. Yeah. He's done.
Matt Eberflus, and he's a cover 2 guy, and I think they need simple. They need simple right now, and they need to shift away from the Fangio scheme. And I think Matt's doing a really good job. They were bad in the first half of the season, Chicago, defensively. And all of a sudden, the second half, they had one of the best defenses in the NFL because young players, Jalen Johnson, man, the Eagles should have tried to trade for that guy. They are playing well. People weren't paying attention to them because they were so bad, but they were playing well down the stretch.
Their general manager, who you've taken a couple shots at, John, made a hell of a trade at the trade deadline, getting sweat.
Yeah,
people are going, why would you go get him?
By the way,
because they're trying to build a better team, and he has added a ton to their defense.
I got to give a shout out to Montez Sweat. He's the first player in NFL history to lead 2 teams in sacks.
Wow.
Yeah.
Same season?
Yeah, he's a good player.
Yep.
Yeah, I give credit where credit's due.
Yeah,
but part of the reason is, Ryan Poles, he's GMing for his job, so he's got to get some players in. And that's the part. That's where Howie has an advantage over other
But
GMs.
doesn't Ryan Poles deserve some credit for trading that number 1 pick and getting the number 1 pick?
Well, it depends what he does. Yeah, I mean, it depends. Now he's got to take another quarterback, right? And he's got Justin Fields. What are you going to do with Justin Fields? Is he going to be able to spin him off for anything?
I think the Atlanta Falcons and a lot of teams would take Justin Fields.
I think a lot of teams will too. The question is, are you getting a second-round pick, or can you talk somebody into a first-round pick? And you got to get this quarterback right. And I'm not as sold on Caleb Williams as everybody else.
Yeah, near am I. I think you got to have that honest conversation about him and where Drake May's better.
Yeah, we got months to decide that. Jeff Kerr, always a pleasure, brother. Thank you very much for coming on today. We will get you on again next Monday. It might be the last in season.
Might be Tuesday. We got a Monday game.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
John, are we
going to Seattle? Do you know yet, Jeff?
I will find out today.
Okay.
But John, if we go, are we going to be taking the emergency Spirit flight back so we can get back in time for locker clean out?
I got to get the folding chair out and take the I always joke it's like flying on a folding chair for 2.5 hours. It's probably the way it's going to go.
Always a pleasure, Jeff Kerr. Thank you very much for jumping in.
It sounds great. Thanks, guys.
That's Jeff Kerr, CBSSports.com. All right, late add to the program. Our good friend Les Bowen said he would jump on. I didn't ask him until 20 minutes ago. Brian Cameron from Philly Sports Network was supposed to jump in with us today. Do us all a favor. His daughter got sick last night. Had to rush her to the hospital. So please, little thoughts and prayers for our buddy Brian Cameron. But Les Bowen said, I'll hop in. Thank you, Les, for coming in off the bench last minute. Mac coming back with more Birds 365. Stay right here.
Any professional sports coach will tell you there's no substitution for preparation. At Malamut & Associates, that is a tenet by which we live. We prepare from day one for victory. Anything less is not acceptable.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction, go with trust,
Go Birds!
and go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
Underdog Fantasy has a way for you to play alongside your favorite football team all season long with their fantasy pick'em game. You pick between 2 to 5 players, select whether they'll go higher or lower on one of their stats, then do what you usually do on a Sunday, watch the games. You can win up to 20 times your money in a single game by going 5 for 5. It's a fantasy game, and the Sports Betting Show wants you to get involved. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com. When you sign up, use the promo code WIN, and Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. That's UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN.
EAGLES, Eagles.
You got Mac and Mac here on Birds 365. McMullen and McDonald, our bud, Les Bowen, going to join us coming up in less than 15 minutes from now. Johnny Mac, I want to ask you a question about this Philadelphia Eagle defense, and we've taken some pretty good hard shots at the coaching of this defense, as well we should. They decided to hire Sean Desai after Jonathan Gannon left. We can relitigate the whole, was he tampered with? Was he 100% present for the Super Bowl? Forget all that, okay? Just put that aside, please, for a minute.
It's one of my favorites, by the way, Jody. He wasn't trying to win the Super Bowl.
I don't think even the biggest of haters can't say that, but they can hang their hat over. He was distracted, as you like to point out. Shane Steichen had been much more involved talking about taking a new job than Jonathan Gannon had leading up to the Super Bowl, but nobody questioned Shane Steichen's ability to narrow focus on the game against Kansas City. Just please put it all aside. Don't even go there. They decided to hire Sean Desai because Jonathan Gannon's no longer here. He didn't do a great job from day one, despite the fact that they were 8-1, and they're going, our defense really should be better at this time. Dawned on Sirianni then, and he eventually pulls the plug and goes to Matt Patricia. And I have no problem saying Matt Patricia has been an abject failure. No other way to describe it other than failure. The idea itself was a failure, and the results have been a failure. So this defense is a mess. But I don't want to lose track of the fact that this defense just isn't as good personnel-wise as it was last year.
Not even close.
That the general manager, he and his entire staff, the front office, the player procurers for the Philadelphia Eagles, made some decisions during this offseason, and they shortchanged the defense, plain and simple. We can talk about the overall Eagle evaluation of the importance of the linebacker position, and that's certainly part of it. But they made decisions that just have not paid off this year, one of which was Nolan Smith. They once again, after drafting a defensive lineman with the 9th pick in the draft, decided to go right back into the defensive line with the 30th pick in the draft, and Nolan Smith is giving them next to nothing. You want to give me rookie explanation, startup costs, all that stuff? Okay, fine. They should be lessened with a first-round draft pick. When you use a first-round pick on a player, there is an assumption that you're going to come in and contribute in year one. Maybe not be a star, maybe not do Micah Parsons things like he did down in Dallas, but a hell of a lot more than Nolan Smith has done. Then you get to the linebacker. We don't even plug in anybody at linebacker. Let TJ Edwards walk right out the door. Foolishness. And then even safety. Now, we'll never know how the negotiations went with CJ that he ended up signing a 1-year deal with the Lions at an above average market value deal, but not outrageously above. and it was just a 1 year kind of pillow prove it type deal. They decided to go with James Bradbury as their key retention player in the secondary rather than CJGJ. They trade for Kevin Byard in season. Has Kevin Byard, I know he had the one interception against Kansas City. It was a bad pass. Mahomes just kind of threw it to him. It wasn't like he made some outrageous play for it. And you and I sat here and said, nice job, Howie Roseman. Saw a need, addressed the need, went out and got an upgrade of a player. How much of an upgrade has he really been, John?
No, hasn't been nearly what expected. And obviously he was a 2-time All-Pro. So, and you didn't expect to get that, but I thought he had more left in the tank. And he's just been a guy. He hasn't been nearly as impactful as you would have hoped for. So, yeah, I mean, Howie had a special season. I talked about career years. Well, Howie may have had his career year as a GM in 2022. Everything he touched seemed to turn the goal for pretty much. There are a few mistakes, as always, but this year hasn't been the same. And I'm not ready to give up on Nolan Smith. I'm not ready to give up on Nakobe Dean, but the Eagles hung their hat on certain things, and they didn't come to fruition. Even Reed Blankenship, who was good early in the season, kind of started leaking oil later in the season. Maybe we all jumped the gun on Reed Blankenship as an undrafted guy because he was such a great story. But with draft picks especially, I'm going to give a little bit more rope to those guys. Especially Nolan was the 30th pick in the draft. So when you're top 10 like Jalen Carter, you got to be impactful. And if you're not, all the teams now, we know the first 18 teams in the draft, right? Those top 10 teams, they want to find an immediate contributor. A little bit different maybe in certain situations.
But 10's the number. After 10, if you're 11 pick in the draft, you can have.
Well, no, I mean it's not a hard fast rule, but I mean if you're
it sounds like you're defending the fact that the 30th pick in the draft you got to cut some slack, but the 10th you can't.
The third, it's
trying
just
to determine where the cutoff is.
Right,
that you can be patient, but the others can ask for results immediately.
It's realism. I mean, go look at the 30th. Go look at the history of the 30th pick. I'll pull it up as we speak. I can tell you it's going to have a hell of a lot more misses than hits. And I didn't even know it offhand. So here we go. 30th picks. Nolan Smith. George Karlaftis had a bad first year, turning into a player in the second year. So that's positive. Gregory Rousseau.
George Karlaftis did a hell of a lot more in his first year than Nolan Smith did.
He did not play well. He did not play well as a rookie. Gregory Rousseau, Bills. Noah Igbunag. I can't even say his name of the Dolphins. I don't know what he's doing. DeAndre Baker spent more time in jail than he did on the field for the Giants. Mike Hughes, who got injured. TJ Watt, Defensive Player of the Year. There's a big hit in 2017. Might be Defensive Player of the Year again. Vernon Butler, Panthers. Really? Demarius Randall had a season or two with the Packers. A pretty good player.
You worked past that TJ Watt pretty damn quickly.
I just said Defensive Player. Defensive Player of the Year. He could be again here. That's a big hit. I just said that. How am I going past it quickly? I'm running down the list. Vernon Butler, Demarius Randall, Jimmy Ward, Alec Ogletree, A.J. Jenkins, Muhammad Wilkerson was a really good player. 2011, you got to go back. He's probably the second best to TJ. Jabad Best, Kenny Britt,
all right, quick stop. And I know we're looking at one season. That's all we got is one season of Nolan. So compare all of those guys to Nolan Smith. And then we're going to add next season and the season after season. I readily admit it's an unfair comparison because all those other guys have seasons of work for us to analyze. Nolan Smith's not better than any of them. There isn't one guy on that list where I say, all right, this guy, except maybe Baker, who you rightfully pointed out, spent more time fighting court cases and staying out of jail than actually being on the field. But all those guys, and I'm not saying Nolan Smith is bound for failure for the rest of his career. He did nothing. And if we go back and check the rookie year of all of those guys, I'm telling you, Nolan Smith is right there with any of them. It's the worst of the you want to go back 10 years?
I don't even
of
know
the
what
10.
Noah. I don't even know what Noah Igbandini did. I don't know. But to bring up Karlaftis, 119. So if you use PFF, 119 edge rushers, he was 110 as a rookie. Terrible. I mean. And by the way, he's 69. It's not great, but he's turning into a pretty good pass rusher. Certainly on a team that knows how to rush the passer with Steve Spagnuolo. And I'm not giving up on George Karlaftis. I think he's going to be a good player. I'm just saying sometimes it takes rookies on the back end in the first round it takes them some time. And yeah, in top 10, and again, not hard and fast. There's plenty of 11 to 20s, but you have more as you go down in the draft, the hit rate, it decreases. I mean, that's just common sense. And if you screw up a top 10 pick, you got issues. Then you start talking about GMs losing jobs when you screw up top 10 picks, because you shouldn't have as many misses up there. It's kind of my point. Even the Kobe Dean.
With every slot in the first round that you move down, the 30th pick in the draft is still really important. Is it as important as the 10th? No, of course not. It's not like a fourth rounder. It's a first round pick. The 30th pick is still a first round pick. And I got no problem saying Nolan Smith's year this year has been a lost year. And that it's on Howie's record. And he's got to take a hit for it, because a first round pick to get absolutely nothing out of, and that's what they got out of.
Well, you got TJ Watt in 2017. You got Muhammad Wilkerson in 2011, who was a really good player for a short period. The Jets guy.
Yep.
Boy, then I got to go down to Reggie Wayne in 2001. Eric Allen in 1988. I mean,
do you think? And I know it's a rotational position, but
and that was a second round pick back then. That was so far back in '88, but
kind of makes everybody into a non-starter. But do you think Nolan Smith will get starter reps for the Philadelphia Eagles next year? Starter being over 50% of the snaps.
I don't. My biggest problem with Nolan Smith is his shoulder. I've said it pretty consistently. I think he's got a serious problem with that shoulder, and it seems to be a chronic problem. And then I get to the football stuff. Look, I think the Eagles got too enamored with Hassan Reddick's success and thought, oh, well, all 235-pound guys are going to be able to hold up like Hassan Reddick, and I just don't think that's the case. But so there's a number of issues, and I'm not saying by any stretch that he's played well, but he's also played out of position. They got to play Mike linebacker. I don't think they're doing him any favors either. You got him. We just talked about with Jeff Kerr. They got him covering Saquon Barkley in space.
You want to know something? Here's what I read into him playing the Mike linebacker. That's not good news. That's scary news. They're so afraid to put him in as just an edge pass rusher that they don't think he can do it. They think he's going to get dominated. They're just reaching for ways to get him on the field. So it's better to play him out of position than to play him in the position we think he's best suited to play. Because we don't think he's good enough to play that position.
I think it had more to do with injuries. They just had no linebackers when they did it. But yeah, I don't think it's a positive sign. I'll say that. But I think it was more injury related that they threw him out there because they had to. And I don't think long term you're going to see him at Mike linebacker.
No, nor do I. But hey, he better prove that he can play the edge in the NFL at some point as the 30th pick in the draft. All right, McMullen, McDonald coming back. I see Les Bowen in our green room, control room, ready to hop aboard. He's waving. He's smiling. He's lying to himself to think the Eagles got a chance this week.
Les ain't lying.
No, he's shaking his head.
No.
Let's take a quick timeout and let Les shake his head for us live here on Birds 365 next.
Go to get your game on. Go for the beers. Go for the cheers. Go for the hit and the hits. Go for the stakes and the stakes. Go to get your parlay on. Go to get your party on. Go for the scene. Go for the screens. Go for the gallery. Go for the win. Go to Ocean. Visit theoceanac.com to plan your visit.
At Pond Lehocky, we've recovered billions of dollars for our clients, and we're confident we can do the same for you. With over 250 years of combined courtroom experience, we've helped over 100,000 injured clients obtain some of the largest settlements in Pennsylvania. One conversation is all it takes to help you and your family get back on track. If you've been injured in an accident, give Pond Lehocky a call.
They're carving them up and good play calling along the way. First and goal at the 6.
On the field of life, First Trust Bank is there for you.
Champions on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Because Philadelphia dreams deserve a Philadelphia bank.
Underdog Fantasy has a way for you to play alongside your favorite football team all season long with their fantasy pick'em game. You pick between 2 to 5 players, select whether they'll go higher or lower on one of their stats, then do what you usually do on a Sunday, watch the games. You can win up to 20 times your money in a single game by going 5 for 5. It's a fantasy game, and the Sports Betting Show wants you to get involved. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com. When you sign up, use the promo code WIN, and Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. That's UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN.
Do you stream on a Roku, Fire Stick, Google TV, or Apple TV? Now you can watch 6ABC 24/7 with the 6ABC Philadelphia streaming app.
And the big story on Action News.
Search 6ABC Philadelphia and start streaming today.
EAGLES. Eagles.
Mac guys here on Birds 365. We are joined by Les Bowen, who John McMullen said Les was texting him during the game and just pointing out the deficiencies of the Philadelphia Eagles. Those were easy texts to send yesterday, that weren't they, Les?
Oh, boy. First of all, the coach tried to sort of half-ass the whole sitting the starters versus trying to win thing. He went in, Fletcher Cox sat just as a veteran day, I guess.
Yeah.
Swift was a little bit sick, so he didn't play. Devontae Smith, let's not play him because he's got an injury. Darius Slay, well, we could have put him on IR if he was going to miss 4 weeks, but let's just have him miss 4 weeks anyway.
I think somebody realized they were playing in MetLife last, and they were like,
well, yeah, but then they didn't really sit the key players. They sort of tiptoed in with this, the Commanders probably aren't going to beat the Cowboys, but in case they do, maybe we should try to win this. And that's it. You can't play football like that. And it was the disaster, not just on the scoreboard, but they got the quarterback's throwing hand hurt. They got A.J. Brown's knee injured, and they got Sidney Brown's out for
the rest, he'll be doing well to be back for next year's opener. And maybe Sidney Brown wouldn't have sat anyway because you can't sit everybody when you sit the regulars. But still, this was the worst possible way to do it. Would you have been down more than 24-0 in the second quarter if you had started Marcus Mariota? And
would have been tough to be down more.
It's
they
just
definitely half-assed it.
It's unbelievable it's yet another log on the fire here for me. People that think that this is all going to come together somehow now, and there are times when I'm kind of glad that I'm retired. Most of the time, I'm kind of like, gee, I'd like to be down there some days. I'd like to have some access, but even though I don't really want to work hard. But this week, when we're going to have to listen to all this, it's nothing, you wipe everything away, it's a new season. I have no stomach for this crap whatsoever. This is like, at this point, the Eagles are like the Monty Python parrot sketch. They're not pining for the fjords. They're gone. It's over.
Well, the only reason I say, it has more to do with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers than the Philadelphia.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
I mean, they played the worst team in football yesterday. I think they had 113 passing yards. They won 9-0. All right, they won the game, so they did that part of it. But I think Carolina had 2, and I haven't watched the game, but they had 2 touchdowns called back. They missed a couple. The Bucs aren't good. So by no means am I saying
the Giants aren't good. The Cardinals aren't good.
Yes. And can the Eagles lose to the Bucs? Of course. But they can beat them as well because, and that's where I said you just mentioned some of the names. Fletcher Cox had a Veterans Day out of nowhere. And I agree with you. The Eagles handled that very poorly. But he's going to play. And Slay's going to play. And AJ's going to play. He's going to be back. And Devontae should be back. And DeAndre's going to be back. DeAndre Swift. So to me, they're probably going to out-talent the Bucs and find a way to win that game. And then they're going to be a road apple for San Francisco. That's where I am with this particular team.
I'll be shocked if they get to that. I really will. At this point, the defense isn't functional.
I agree there.
Stop anything. And
I can't even, unless I say it all the time. As many problems as there are on the offense, I have a tough time getting to the offense because I can't get past the defense.
And it's not that they don't have any talent there. This is the worst defensive performance I've ever seen. Going back, the Chip Kelly years or whatever you want to bring up.
Bill Davis would be a welcome addition.
Yes. The replacing Sean Desai with Matt Patricia that alone should get a coach fired. It's just ridiculous what they're trying to do, what they look like trying to do it. I've never seen
that. To me, is the best. If you want Nick Sirianni fired, to me, that's got to be the lead bullet point. Changing defensive coordinators because they can phrase it any way they want. After 13 games. One or the other, if you know early, all right, this guy just doesn't have it.
Right.
Pull the trigger early and maybe where you can make an actual difference. To do it after 13 games, and again, people would say, Les, it can't be any worse. Oh, yeah, it can. You're seeing it in living color. It's gotten much worse with Matt Patricia versus Sean Desai. No communication. Now the veterans don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
It used to be just the young players. Now it's the veterans. Yeah. I mean, it's an abject disaster. There's no way to defend it.
Les, let me, for conversational purposes, and I know the question is probably unfair to begin with, because the Eagles defense is the defense as a whole, and it's 25 guys. It's not just one individual. But I'm just going to pick up one for the sake of conversation. We all acknowledge the Eagles' 2 defensive coordinators this year have stunk. Sean Desai into Matt Patricia, the whole change, and could it get worse? Yeah, all that in the pile together. James Bradbury has had a lousy year, an awful year.
Yeah.
They paid him good money this offseason to retain his services, and his drop-off has been precipitous.
Yeah.
How much of that are we putting on Sean Desai, on Matt Patricia, on his position coach, on James himself, on the decision to keep James? He's a defensive guy I pick out for a very particular reason. They could have let him walk. He could have left.
Yeah.
They let a bunch of guys walk this offseason. One they chose not to let walk was James Bradbury, and his play has deteriorated before our very eyes. Is that on the DC? Is that on the decision to keep him? Is it on James himself? How do you explain the season James Bradbury had?
That's a tough one, Jody. I have to acknowledge that I would have re-signed him. You know, I thought he played very, very well. He's a smart guy. He really knows the game, which makes this kind of puzzling in some respects. I do think there are times when they've asked him to do things that he's not good at. You know, I think he'd be still pretty good in like a cover 2 type role. What do you think, John? I think he's
I've always thought he's
big and physical. Yeah. He just doesn't have speed and quickness anymore. But you can, guys like that are functional in the right system, like Rasul Douglas. You know, you just have to put them in the, as Nick keeps saying week after week, the right positions to be successful. And I don't think they have done that. But with Bradbury, there's the one thing that would have stuck in the back of my mind, even if I had wanted to re-sign him last offseason, which I did. He has kind of a history in his career of having a good year and a bad year. And it wouldn't shock me if he went, if they got rid of him somehow and he went somewhere else and played really well. I don't understand
exactly what Eagle fans want to hear.
That's kind of why he was available. You know, I mean, it's kind of like he has a good year and then he has a year where you're like, and then he comes back and plays. I don't understand it. I don't know why, but that has been a little bit of his career pattern. He hasn't been great everywhere he's been. I don't think he's the focal point of this for me. Playing without Slay for him is very, very hard. I don't think he would have done well last year playing without Slay. He didn't have to. You know, I just think with no pass rush, this scheme is dead in the water, and they have no pass rush.
Yeah. Scheme, by the way, I think is a problem. I think you see it all the time, Les. You know, when Tony Dungy took the league by storm, everybody copied him. Then everybody caught up to the defense. When Pete Carroll and Gus Bradley and Dan Quinn did everything they did, people copied them, and then people caught up to them. Now I think everybody's caught up to the Big Fangio scheme. And I think the Eagles, who pride themselves of being ahead of the curve, typically, are behind the curve. And they haven't figured this out. I truly, truly think they got to scrap the entire scheme, but that's off-season stuff.
Yeah.
In season, I think they have to simplify. But we're at week 18. What can you do at this point? Can't do anything.
Defensively, I don't know. I would seriously just give it back to Desai this week and see what happens. I mean, that sounds ridiculous, but
yeah. Well, I would have sounded ridiculous to give it to Matt Patricia. So why not?
Yeah. You know, offensively, can you please just give the quarterback a hot read on a blitz? Because that's what's going to happen Monday night in Tampa. They're going to blitz every down because the Eagles are horrible. When faced with the blitz, they don't give the quarterback, they don't block it. They don't max protect ever. They might keep a running back in. By the way, those Rashad Penny people that were so
maybe you saw it with that pass protection. People.
He can't, he can't pick up a blitz. He can't play here. I mean, that's just how it is. That's always the way it's been for running backs here. When Deuce Staley was the running backs coach, if you can't pick up a blitz, you don't belong on the field. But you have to give the quarterback some kind of answer. And
all right, can I interject?
Smart people, keep doing this week after week after week.
Do you
understand it, John? Do you understand it?
Well, here's where I'll say maybe we're pointing in the wrong direction. And I'll say this because Go watch Indy tape with Phillip Rivers. There were plenty of hot routes with Phillip Rivers. Plenty. He excelled at it. He was one of the best in the business at it. Maybe the quarterback can't do it.
But if you're running 4 verticals, which they were yesterday, I don't know what he's supposed to do. I don't see them giving him hot route. I don't see the possibility.
No, they don't. And that's what I'm saying. They did it for Phillip, and they're not doing it for Jalen Hurts. So my question
you're saying that Jalen, you can't tell Jalen if they blitz, okay, we're going to send Goddard on a slant over here. Look for Goddard.
Well, no, I'm saying you can certainly tell him to do it. I'm saying if he doesn't feel comfortable doing it, if he doesn't want to do it, like I would talk to Paul Domowitch, your buddy and mine, all the time about Jalen Hurts is just not going to throw the ball to running backs. He's not a dump off guy. By the time he gets to the 3rd or 4th progression, he wants to run anyway. So you're never going to have that running back that's going to have 60 catches because you're dumping the ball off. Certain quarterbacks like to do certain things. Phillip Rivers wasn't mobile at all, right? So he understood he had to get the football out of his hands. And he said, he excelled, as I said. If you're going to blitz me, I'm going to throw it right behind your ear. Hot route looks good, bang. I'm saying Jalen Hurts likes to do different things, and they built this offense around Jalen Hurts, and he's not particularly comfortable with hot routes and typical traditional
Let me interject and ask you a question, John. If he's not comfortable throwing to the ball to the backside of the backfield, and he's not comfortable at throwing hot routes, what is he that good at it that he merits a $250 million contract? And can't just say, this just dawned on them. This Sirianni's coached him 2 years now before they give him the contract. Not 1, 2. 1 startup year and then the phenomenal year they had last year. Going into this offseason, do you think that they didn't think he could throw the ball out of the backfield and or pick out a hot route?
There are, yes, I think they.
And how the hell did they give him $250 million?
Well, how about look at the 3rd and 20 play to A.J. Brown. How many quarterbacks can make that play? How many quarterbacks can make? There's tons more stuff that are more important than dumping the football off to a running back. He's able to do stuff off platform, off schedule. He's able to pick up the team.
He absolutely is. He's a very good quarterback, and he hasn't even been that bad this year. He's
agree.
Probably the 4th best quarterback in the NFC this year. That's not. But
I think he's still top 10, but probably near 10.
Max protect if you're not going to give him something easy, because, well, first of all, Phillip Rivers was about 6'5" or so, right?
Yeah.
Jalen isn't. So when there are rushers in his face, I just don't see it seems illogical to me to expect him to create something out of this or, find somebody downfield. What they're doing clearly isn't working. They have to find another way to handle the blitz.
I think you're definitely right. I wish there had been more evolution to this offense. And I thought
they didn't do anything in the offseason last year they thought they had the greatest thing going, and they'll just roll it out there this year and score 40 points a game. That I'm convinced of that. I mean, they
were out talenting people, and they thought, we're just going to out talent people. And other teams made adjustments, and they spent the offseason trying to stop what the Eagles are doing. They made some good adjustments, and the Eagles haven't adjusted back. I think all of that is true. But I think, for people that saying Shane Steichen, it was the same offense with Shane Steichen. I mean, they were just more successful because
some of the calls might not have been as predictable.
No, he had a better feel. Shane had a great feel for the callbacks and setting people up. And I think, that comes with experience. Maybe that's what I talked about with Sean Desai. Young coaches have to grow into these positions. And
but Shane Steichen he didn't even have a full season under his belt going into last year. Where'd he get that experience?
Well, he took over in the Chargers game in that first season. So you're talking, if you give Brian Johnson a year and a half, people want him fired. Maybe he's there a year and a half.
Steichen
Maybe
was
he's
already
not.
good after a half. Steichen hit the ground running last year in what was less than a full year's time. So Brian Johnson, I'm not going a year and a half. I'm going day one. He better be ready to be more impressive game one next
but
year.
That's where I think, and I get it because it's people are recency bias. We've just seen 5 and 6 losses. The Eagles for the first half of this season, for the 10-1 start, they're the top 5 offense in everything.
Mm-hmm.
Everything. I mean, so he was pretty good early and he's struggling late, or at least if you want to blame, I think it's Nick's offense. If you want to blame somebody, I think you should blame Nick Sirianni. But that's me.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah,
but they were top 5. They were a top 5 offense.
They were top. They weren't in efficiency. They really weren't. In fact, they had terrible red zone numbers there.
Yeah, well, they did early, but then it was
Yeah.
getting better. But they had great third down numbers. They still have great third down numbers. They had great fourth down numbers, obviously, because of the tush push. They were top 5 in yards per game, top 5 in points per game. Again, early in the season with the 10-1 start, Jalen Hurts was the leader on the betting markets for MVP. People forget that. I get, like I said, I get why, because we got to go back to 1986 and Jody's Jets to see this kind of collapse for a 10-1 team. So it's been a long time, and I get it.
Let me ask you guys. This is something I was thinking about this morning. It is such an abrupt and incredible turnaround, and there was some luck involved and some opposing players drop passes and so forth to get them to 10-1. But nonetheless, those searing losses to the 49ers and the Cowboys, those blowout losses, do you think they changed the whole team? Do you think the analogy I've used is the cartoon character running off the edge of the cliff and doesn't realize that he's, running in midair, and then he looks
off
down.
The cliff, yeah. Wildy Coyote.
Do you think something happened there where after those 2 games, do they like, geez, we're not that good? Maybe we were just lucky. Was there a change in the?
I think so. I think
outlook?
They were. I think they were. There was a lot of hubris in this organization. They thought they were the cat's meow, so to speak, and then they got put in their place, and I think it rattled them. And that's part of the Sean Desai thing. Les, they started thinking about making a change at defensive coordinator when they were 8-1. Who does that?
Nobody. No.
And the thing we haven't talked, at least my opinion, enough about is before they told him to go up to the press box, they pulled third down responsibilities from him. You started this conversation, Les, by saying the Eagles kind of tried to find a compromise position by sitting some guys and not playing other. I'm a compromise guy. I believe there's a lot of gray areas in life, and that you would be well advised to find a good gray area rather than going to the radical left or the radical right. But sometimes you got to make a call. You can't find a spot in the middle. And pulling third down defensive responsibilities from a coordinator and sharing the responsibility, that's just dumb. Scared, worried, not up to, no, dumb. D-U-M-B, dumb. And that's what the Philadelphia Eagles did this year.
Yeah. Les, are the Eagles too collaborative? Jeffrey Lurie. I mean, Jody just brought it up with the third downs. If you go back to the end of Doug Peterson, you remember Doug handed all play calling. Nobody knew it. He gave Rick Scangarella, I think it was, I get it mixed up. He gave me either red zone and Press Taylor had hurry up or vice versa. And he's handing off third downs. It's Jeffrey. It sounds good. Collaboration, but somebody's got to be in charge.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, John. That's a very good. You might be onto something there. The one criticism I've had of Jeffrey is he sees things he likes on other teams and decides this is what we need to do. And that was very early in his ownership tenure. That was his, he was all about Bill Walsh, and the West Coast offense. And I don't know. I mean, Jeffrey this year is a mystery to me. He hasn't said anything.
He
rarely does, but
no, he's very.
Sal
was there, Sal Palantonio, and he saw Jeffrey coming in to the locker room, and he asked me, "Is that normal?" It's very normal. He
goes in the locker room,
yeah,
but it's to pat guys on the back.
Exactly.
He doesn't give any. Jeffrey's not standing there in the middle of the floor,
No, he's not Jerry Jones in it. He's not doing press conferences after every game.
But one of my most vivid memories of my time covering the Eagles is that game in Detroit, Thanksgiving, Chip Kelly year, 2015. They got blown out by a horrible Lions team in Detroit, and several of us tried to find Jeffrey Lurie after that game, and he made a certain that we did not lay eyes on him. I mean, you just couldn't get any, because we all felt like this is a game that gets coaches fired, and it turned out, that was pretty much the trigger, but you just couldn't find Jeffrey Lurie to save your life.
Well, I think that's why people were looking at it, and he walked in front of all of us, made himself very visible. Obviously, he was not going to talk, but people are starting to. The groundswell is coming. Should Nick Sirianni be fired? Now, you and I were going, I think he's done enough to get another season, even if he loses in Tampa Bay. But I'm a continuity guy. Like I always look at Pittsburgh. They've had 3 coaches since 1968.
True.
I think they do it the right way. And by the way, all 3 have won Super Bowls. I think they do it the right way.
That's a very good point. For me, arguing the opposite way, I would say, how does what he's done so far inform the future? What is the plan going forward? What do we see in his response to this situation that makes us confident he somehow knows how to get this back on track? I see nothing. I see yet another, yesterday with that half-ass sit some guys, don't sit some guys, that was a disaster. Firing the defensive coordinator was a disaster. I would not just fire him. I would, if I were Jeffrey Lurie, I'd want to sit down with him, which I'm sure he's done to some extent, but I would have a season end sit down and really get, what I've said over and over is I would get, what is your plan? What do you think we need here? What's going on? And if those answers are good answers, then sure, don't fire him. But if he's as clueless as he seems, another year of this isn't going to be better.
All right, Les, here's the last question I have for you today. And it's about Nick Sirianni, but it's about everybody else in that locker room too. Sirianni had his post-game press conference yesterday. The reporters were in there. They tried to put a spin on it. Brandon Graham, Mr. Positivity. I like the fact that Fletcher Cox at least tried to be a little bit realistic. But as of right now, they got to get ready for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, playing the way they're playing. Knowing Tampa's a beatable foe, but can they beat anybody on the planet right now? They got to come up with a game plan and a mindset to be able to win this game this week. And to be truthful, I think they're just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. Out of that pile of what you're throwing at the wall, what's going to work the best? If you were like, they brought Les Bowen in to give either a technical or an emotional uplifting speech to the locker room, what would you emphasize? What would be the thing you try and hang your hat on?
Well, I guess you have to go back to all that. It really is nothing. A lot of teams, there are a lot of 11-win teams that haven't played great. It's not the finish isn't going to define how things go next Monday night. It's going to be what you put on the field Monday night. I would, I'm not a run the ball guy because that's an answer from 1980. But if you screwed up the quarterback's throwing hand yesterday, which it certainly looks like you did, and you hurt A.J. Brown's knee, maybe this is a good week to really lean on that. Maybe you really lean on that run game, keep the defense off the field because it can't play, and see if you can somehow get through this with a win.
Yeah.
But I don't have a lot for you, frankly. I don't.
But by the way, that was they had a huge rushing game against Tampa when they were down there earlier in the season. So, maybe that's
back when people thought you couldn't run against Tampa. That was one of the themes going in.
Beta Bay and all that. Yeah, I remember talking about it. Now, Beta wasn't healthy. I don't know if he's healthy. I don't know what's going on with Tampa Bay right now. I got to delve into it. But, I mean, that might have been the most impressive Eagles game of the season, looking back. They completely dominated
Miami.
Tampa.
I thought the Miami win was a heck of a win. Of course, I thought Miami, at that point, Miami looked like one of the top couple teams in the AFC.
Yeah.
Miami's kind of about where the Eagles are without the spectacular, swoon at the end, which, by the way, John, you mentioned the Vic Fangio system, and everybody says it was such a shame that they didn't get to hire Vic Fangio.
Vic gave up 56 to stick in Baltimore. Now, Baltimore's a great team, but if you give up 56.
Is Miami's defense blowing it out right now? I haven't seen
it. They
56 is 56. I don't care if you're giving up to the Rams' greatest show on turf. That ain't good.
Late against Josh Allen last night either. Fangio's defense couldn't get a big stop. Les Bowen, thank you very much for jumping in on late notice, no less. We appreciate that even more. Les, thank you very much.
Thank you, Les.
Get you on soon enough again. Thanks, bud.
Thank you, guys. Retired people, we're just sitting around.
You got downtime. Yeah, you feel.
Go pick up some dog poop. I don't know.
There we go. I got to do that same thing.
And then throw it at the wall and see what sticks for the Philadelphia Eagles. Les, thank you very much. All right, we got to take our final timeout here. Come back. I do want to address one of the streamers who made a point or attempted to make a point, and I do want to talk about it. It gets the heart of what John and I do here every day, or at least from my standpoint, it does. I want to speak from John, but do want to address one of the points we made here on Birds 365. We'll use that to put a bow on the show.
Any professional sports coach will tell you there's no substitution for preparation. At McMullen Associates, that is a tenet by which we live. We prepare from day one for victory. Anything less is not acceptable.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction, go with trust,
Go Birds!
and go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
Underdog Fantasy has a way for you to play alongside your favorite football team all season long with their fantasy pick'em game. You pick between 2 to 5 players, select whether they'll go higher or lower on one of their stats, then do what you usually do on a Sunday. Watch the games. You can win up to 20 times your money in a single game by going 5 for 5. It's a fantasy game, and the sports betting show wants you to get involved. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com. When you sign up, use the promo code WIN, and Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. That's UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN.
EAGLES, Eagles.
You got Mac and Mac here on Birds 365. We thank Les Bowen and Jeff Kerr for helping out with us. John, if you allow me just a minute here, I want to explain something to one particular streamer, but all of our streamers. You and I were having a debate about Nolan Smith and how much evaluation you can put on the 30th pick in the draft as compared to 10th pick in the draft and the like. And Steve Thomas was his name, checked in and said, stop. This is a 2020 hindsight conversation. Everybody loved Nolan Smith being picked at number 30. I'm not sure that's right, but we'll assume that it was. Everybody loved it. I liked it. I thought it was a good pick. I was a little surprised they went right back into the D line again, but I thought he was actually valued at 30. So I'm just giving you my evaluation of the pick at the time. It's a 2020 hindsight evaluation. Yeah, that's the world in which we live. Guess what? You're judged by what you do. It doesn't matter that if every single Jeff Lurie, Howie Roseman, it would have been, I guess, Desai hired by that point. Nick Sirianni, everybody around the Philadelphia Eagles, the two hosts of Birds 365, the entire staff of WIP, all the streamers to Birds 365, all love the pick. If the guy can't play, you can't just continue to say, well, that's 2020 hindsight. Yes, that's what we judge in hindsight. The player performs or he doesn't perform, and then you reevaluate and you make decisions based on that. Not on what everybody thought at a given moment when a player is acquired. That's just dumb. I had an argument with one of my partners years ago, a guy by the name of Sid Rosenberg, one of my favorite people on the planet.
I know Sid. Yeah.
One of the most hard-headed people on God's green earth. And Sid said, as we're doing a show, I think it was about Steve Phillips was the Met general manager. Well, I can't criticize that pick because I agreed with it. No, that's your job to criticize the pick. If you have enough evidence in and the guy is not good enough and or is a bust, you have to acknowledge that. Even if you agreed with the move at the time, you have to say, hey, I can only be so critical of Steve Phillips but you can't not criticize him. You can't say the words, I can't criticize him because I agreed with it. No. You evaluate the performance. It doesn't matter. 2020 hindsight is not a defense. It never has been. It never will be. That's what life is, 2020 hindsight. You can always see things differently in the rearview mirror.
I think it's always been pretty easy for me. It's and Brian Johnson said, he's not the first one, but process-driven profession, but we're judged on results.
Absolutely.
I thought Ryan Leaf was going to be better than Peyton Manning.
Exactly.
I'd like to pay. I got it wrong.
So
Guess what?
You just keep throwing Ryan Leaf out there for 10 years and go, damn, I thought I was really sure about that on draft.
I didn't have information that it was a train wreck from a mental health perspective. I was just looking at his, traits and things like that. But I got it wrong. End of the day, you get it wrong. It's easy. I think I agree with what the streamer said. I thought at the time, Nolan Smith was tremendous value at 30. But if he doesn't perform, I'm not going to say he was a great pick. I thought at the moment he was tremendous value at 30. Right now, he hasn't had a good rookie year. And yeah, ultimately, I'm not ready to give up on him. But ultimately, if he continues to play like this, yeah, I will proclaim him a failed draft pick. I mean, that's just the way it works. That's just the way it works. And that's why guys get hired and fired. Nobody's asking, about you made the right decision. Yeah, sometimes you make the right decision, get the wrong result.
It happens all the time.
Yeah.
And I'll continue to do this show and any other show I do, evaluating performance rather than past evaluation of whether a deal was or wasn't good at the time it was made, a decision was made. No, it is a results-driven world in which we live. So, Steve, sorry about that. I dismiss your it's a 2020 hindsight thing. Yeah, life is a 2020 hindsight thing. All right, we're out of time. Went overtime. Thank you to Bill Colarulo for being patient. He's coming up next with the Power Hour. Johnny Mac, you and me back in 22. You in?
Yeah, let's do it.
We'll talk more about the Bucks tomorrow here on Birds 365.
You've been listening to Birds 365, the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate inside the locker room and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at JAKIB Sports. See you next time on Birds 365.